In terms of inspiration, I always think of the very basic, profound point when I was reading the book by this called The Art of Looking Sideways, and it's like the happiest book you can have because it's about 10-inch thick, and it's just going through every single topic, and it forces you to turn the book differently. It forces you to read about things differently. Sometimes it strikes you with just a color inspiration. So on everyday basis, my job is to come in and feel with nothing but optimism and inspiration from whether it's a book that I spend a day to read, to a week, to things I found on internet to go really deep in. So I had to learn on a constantly basis to be optimistic, because you can't be creative feeling sad. It's really hard. So you need to just feel myself with like happiness. So like films, books, internet, whatever is a tool of trade at that point is at the disposal. But basically, for the past few years, I've been trying to go through a much more, let's say, modifying like the life so that everything, there's a process in terms of exposing myself to creativity. So just kind of expecting the unexpected on a daily basis and learning how to make things at the end of the day.
Nice. That's good. I need that book.
Yeah, I need that book.
Sweetie, we have the book.
Oh, we
White book, a lot of writing, little red fading thing on the bottom.
Okay, all right.
Ellen Fisher, sorry, that's the name.
Okay, I need to read that book. Don't make me laugh. Like is a difficult question, and it's annoying that we pose the question, and I find it difficult to answer. But I suppose if you're in a design consultancy, you're not a fine artist, so you don't have that direct, here's some inspiration and then I go and create the work. There's no, that direct link doesn't really exist. So when I happen to solve a problem at work, or when I come across a solution, you can often trace the roots of that inspiration back to something, but that may not be that day or that morning. It may have been like a year ago, 10 years ago, that week, or like a combination of events and things like that. So I think because it's not direct, you never really know if like that inspiration is going to be the one that solves something for you. So it's just a matter of just being a little bit like a sponge and exposing yourself to as much as possible, and then it goes up into the subconscious somewhere, and at some point it'll be useful. But I don't get that burning sort of, oh, this is so inspiring. It's just more about seeing everything as much as possible, going to new places, seeing new things, and just logging it somewhere and hoping that the brain does something with it at a useful time later on. So it's very difficult to say directly what it is. Yeah.
Inspiration is a funny thing, yeah, exactly. And I agree with you that I'm almost wondering whether the question, there are moments where I actually have given up on sort of like, that question. It's like, what, it's not where do you get it? It's like you don't go and get it anywhere. Anyways, that's not how it works. You just have a certain openness to whatever, and that whatever does whatever. It's sort of like, it's really, you can't, there's no mechanism that you can, engineer for yourself. It's just being open, and it happens in unexpected places, right? And it's the typical places like documentaries and books and magazines and blogs. Yes, we all do that, right? But all of a sudden you hear an article on NPR, or you walk across the street and you see a trash bin, and that's when it happens, and you can't plan for it. Or I think we all by nature are open in mind, otherwise we wouldn't be designers. And it's funny, like how can you be good or not good about it? Like I think we're all good about it, and it just.
Well, I think everybody gets inspired, but maybe I suppose our role is kind of maybe our training as well. It's about listening out for those things.
I think the important thing, if there was something to do right or wrong about it, was to make sure. And I'm struggling with that actually at the moment, where just work, the daily grind is like so overwhelming that you're not breathing. You don't find the time to sort of like lean back and soak in and inspirate, I guess. And I think that's when it becomes a bit difficult, right? But even that, it's funny, like, during these really super stressful months where you just don't take anything and you're just outputting. Right. You think the theory should go, well, at some point you're empty and it's not working anymore, but that's not true. Like, it works. You just continue putting stuff out and new ideas happen, and it's funny, like, I don't know, I don't have an answer. I guess.
Maybe that's what it is.
I think one of the topics we're going to talk about today was about defining creativity was one of them. I think it's kind of same vein of thought. Like, to me, creativity is kind of, being able to looking at big picture and also connect dots. So I think we, like you mentioned, we observe a lot of information, a lot of different things everyday life, and we don't know how it's gonna useful or not, or how we're gonna connect those together. But somehow, at one point, it kind of clicks together, and like you said, something really magical, interesting happen. So I think that's, I don't know. To me, that's creativity.
But do you think it's possible to be bad and or good at finding inspiration? Like, is it something that you can get better at? Is there a skill involved?
I don't know about being good or bad at finding inspiration, but I think there is something to this idea that, some people are seen as good creatives or as being creative or not. And I do think that those people who are seen as being creative or being good at delivering creative product, those people, they have a process, they have a certain discipline, a way of looking at situations, taking in and processing information, even just by the fact that they are willing to sit in a space and stare for a little while, watch everything that happens for a while, take it all in, and just have the discipline to stay and sit there and do it. And so I think in that way, people who produce creative product, their willingness to do that, their willingness to be open to doing that, does make them better at it than people who wouldn't do it. So if that makes any sense at all.
I think that's really important.
That means that the creativity and the inspiration are not in the process, but they're there in the chaos. And I think what sometimes is really difficult if you're working in a creative field is to let yourself get into the chaos and to give yourself A, the time to stare into space, or B, the time to make weird connections or to see very different things, or to just think and muse and do something completely, like do nothing for a while. And I think what we also, maybe the people that are in the creative industry are just better at translating and synthesizing and creating the stories, post-rationalizing.
I think we're quite fortunate as well in that people in the creative industry are allowed to exist in a structure that facilitates that. We work in a place we kind of we exist in a kind of professional atmosphere that supports you just to kind of sit on blogs for a few hours, or just to sit staring at a wall full of imagery for a few hours. Whereas if you're at an inherent disadvantage if you're in cubicle land and you're trying to come up with some good ideas, it's like it's got to be a lot harder, So I think there's a few kind of mechanics to it as well, actually, that kind of help us. So a few kind of environmental factors.
The boredom one's interesting. I mean, we were talking just a bit before that break about it, because we're creating technology to like kind of be hidden and get away from technology, and I think that's definitely hilarious in a way.
It's funny, right?
Yeah, it's funny. But I also think that now it's like there's a thing where people will take kind of technology vacations, and there's the side of you're never bored because of it, but there's also this kind of the revolt. So maybe that's not answering the question about boredom.
Do you think it's important for creativity
to
have those breaks?
I think so. I mean, I think that reflection and that incubation is nice. It's hard to get, and probably there's more than boredom. It's distraction. Like it's so easy. Like I have this like horrible habit of just pulling out my phone when I'm in like an elevator or an awkward social situation, and I'll just check nothing. Just and I'm being totally honest. Don't tell anybody. But
this won't go anywhere.
But it's a bad habit, and my girlfriend gets on me for it all the time, and there's really no need for it. So it's like a distraction versus like.
But were you like that before you had technology? Because I have always been a little bit like that.
Yeah.
Being like, oh, a bird.
You always got. Yeah, I think we're probably all a little bit ADD.
Yeah.
But I think what you're talking about is interesting, and it makes me think of the one place where that currently still is to find, which is the plane. And the plane is amazingly inspiring. Like to me, I take creative work on planes. I'm like, all right, nobody can bother me. I don't get emails. I can't check Facebook. It's just, I can sketch. I can think about stuff. I really have time there's no connectivity, there's no distraction because I'm sitting in this small thing. And you know, I have to come up with stuff to do, right? I have to fill the time.
I totally agree. Like, and I kind of look forward to plane trips now for that reason.
Yeah, but now that they're putting Wi-Fi on planes, they're killing it.
Yeah.
Well, no, honestly, and I've read sort of like in manager, you know, statements that they're saying, you know what, this is ridiculous. This is bad. Like, I don't want Wi-Fi on planes. I want
There's
the
a lot
planes
of
to be as they
voices
are.
coming up that are saying being disconnected is the new luxury, you know, like going into a store where they're not tracking whatever you're looking at or whatever way you're walking around, or connecting you to your data, or going into a plane and not having any kind of screen in front of you.
Yeah, you can see all these luxury homes built in the desert 3 hours outside of LA. They are not connected by purpose. You know, they don't have like it's like multi-million-dollar homes, and they by selection decided not to connect the house. You know, they easily could.
Well, I think an interesting trend too right now is everybody looking for toward meditative things and spiritual things as a way to find sort of that moment of quiet even amongst the noise. And that seems to be like really hot now, everybody trying to find, you know, meditation centers and that kind of thing. And I think about that, and I think in terms of connectivity, like, you know, now I think what's going to happen is we need to now learn the discipline of disconnecting. We don't need a technology. We don't need a fancy house in a desert. We need the discipline to not take out our phones. We need the discipline to say, you know what, I am going to sit here for 5 minutes and watch buses go by and not get on the phone.
Yeah, maybe that's where this kind of connectivity kind of trajectory is kind of moving towards. It's like more meaningful connected solutions,
it's like a
you know.
focus, right? Like you can do everything right now when you're connected. You can. You know, I find, you know, it's very easy. Tom and I have had this discussion, I think, many times, where you just get so distracted by all the possibilities. And I think maybe there's some level of filtering or some level of focus that maybe is needed or could happen, where you can only access certain things or certain paths of information, and that would at least allow you to have that kind of focus and that directness of where you're trying to search for.
I think this is interesting because the web is kind of same thing, you know. Yeah. It was a splash of information, tons of information, and it was meaningful to me, and just a bunch of information out there. And now we are talking about making more meaningful, more relevant to you. So, you know, idea of filter, meta filter, something like Google is already helping us to, you know, to filter information so that you have more meaningful information. I think that's kind of interesting kind of trend.
Do you think that's going to remove serendipity though? Like if I walked down the street and everything was tailored just based on my past experience and my preferences, like I'm missing that element of the random and the new and the, you know, like the person to introduce me into tapestry that I never thought I would like. You know, like if everything gets pre-filtered.
I think that's a major element of inspiration, back to that earlier question, right? It was like inspiration comes a lot from disrupting your ideas, your conventions, your thinking models, right? And that might be this really weird movie that you saw, or this documentary, or like an article, something, or like, you know, you're going to a convention and, you know, people talking about, like, you know, allowing you to look at the world in a different way, and you're like, wow, and those are the mind-blowing moments where like, wow, yes, now looking at it that way, that makes me think of these 15 other things.
I think it's interesting in terms of when we think about just the relationship between creativity and connectivity, sort of when I think about them conceptually. I mean, conceptually, I think the two things, I do think being more connected could facilitate being more creative, because you have you have more raw material coming in from more places, different people, different parts of the world, different formats, right? So in theory, I think, you know, the one feeds the other. And I think what we do in response to the more coming in is we adapt our way of, like you're talking about, filtering and filing and organizing and making connections. And I think you see people doing it now, where you see now, okay, I'm a part of the Uber networks on the web, but now I'm looking for interest-based smaller networks. I'm looking for the lesser known ways to connect with people on those networks. So I'm not, getting out there with my public page. I'm looking for the smaller way, right? And I think you're going to see it more too now that we're starting to look at the Internet of Things, right? Like, I don't just want my refrigerator talking to any old body's refrigerator, talking about any old thing. I want it talking about certain things with certain people at certain times. And then I'm going to just one more bit, which was about, you guys brought up a word, it made me think of a word that I really hate, and that's sort of right in the middle of this topic, and it's curation.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a dirty word to me right now.
Really overused.
It's like,
It's like disruption is dirty word.
no, I think curation is because it does, I feel like you are controlling, containing, you are deciding what I see, what I experience, what I do.
Is there this inherent tension, I suppose, with this, as the volume of information increases and increases, we, practically speaking, we need to kind of develop mechanisms to kind of process these. So there's kind of this tension with.
I think it was funny. We were having a trend brainstorm about it. And we're like, curation is so over. We're getting really tired of it. But it's about selecting what you want, and I think that's really where it's going a little bit more. Like being very selective of the things that are interesting, but and not having things pushed towards you, because I think that is something that we're all getting a little bit wary of all these mechanisms and big data telling us what we like.
Yeah, and I think maybe the reason you don't like it is because right now it's not done well, and it's done by machines and algorithms, and there's no kind of emotional connection to it, right? That's why you like to do it, because you have an emotional connection to it. But I think that's what's maybe missing. I think curation is a good thing. I really do, because there's so much out there, and it takes time to filter it all yourself, and it takes time to do it yourself. But it would be nice, like curation is a DJ. I'm saying this because I'm working in music and I'm doing a lot of that lately. But curation is a DJ, and that's a human curation. And you might like that DJ, and you might like the music they play, and so you actually like getting those tracks at you one at a time, the way they're picked by that DJ. But when a machine does that, it's a little different.
I think give me the tools, right? Give me the tools, put the filters in place,
Yes.
Make it so that I can bucket, categorize, sort, but don't do it. Even like we were talking about the DJ, agreed, there are some people whose taste I'm going to like, their taste in music. Right. But I also want, to me, the definition of a good DJ is, if people start to leave the floor, or they're just stopping and staring at you on a song, mix that out.
Yeah.
Go to the next song.
If no one's dancing.
Go to the next song, right?
Yeah, and I guess it's not binary, right? There's a gray area, and there's a gradient